All right, so we're back on mic. At least I hope we are. We're on. So hopefully that's an improvement. So it turns out all you really have to do is just restart your computer. I was thinking about that. I was like, do people do that? I just kind of like close the computer. So, okay. So this is a wet hair edition, and kind of very a la one of the many important aspects of Parinama practice is it's just showing up the best that you can as an act of love. So here we are. I'm showing up the best I can right now. This is the best. I promise you. So one of the things that, like, when I picked up the book to read it just now, one of the things is that I was like, we're halfway through. And I looked back to see, where the actual book ends, and it ends at page 310. And so that was a reminder that for some reason I had it in my head that the book was 336 pages. I think that's something that has to do with the file, because it's 21, 22, 23, 24, 25, 26, 27, 28. Because there's like 2 blank pages at the end of the book. So I think it's like 220, 326. But anyway, not probably that very interesting to you. But one thing that is kind of like a recollection from the process of writing the book was that it used to be in multiple files. So this is actually where the 2 files broke, like right here on this page that we're about to read. So everything up until now used to be in part 1, and now this is literally what part 2 of the book was. And it was interesting too, because in editing, even with proofreading, like there's just a bunch of stuff about like where you make corrections and sometimes messing it up with the break here. But yeah, it's interesting to be at the halfway point, and especially having it be the 4th hub, because personally, as I'm getting into this and coming out of having just done another rotation in the 3rd hub with you all, if you've been reading along with me, it brought up a lot of stuff, and it refined things. It helped clarify things as it relates to my process. And I think one of the things that I'm learning about Parinama, especially as I'm figuring out like how to bring this into the world as, kind of a active, I guess, sort of like an active service, and also turning it into something that's like a sustainable organization, I guess, for lack of a better term. Yeah, it's been interesting to realize that, I was having a conversation with Rachel. If you're watching this, Rachel. And I think the realization came up for the first time that what you get out of this is going to be uniquely about you. And so being very clear, and even removing like ambition, or even traditional marketing of this, of like, this is what you'll get out of it. It's kind of a challenge to figure out, but also could potentially open up the door, but not the time for that right now. Anyway, that was a lot of what came out in the 1st hub, which for me had a lot to do with my reassessment of myself as an individual in this process. And now as we move into our identity within belonging and connection, for me, this is also, the timing is like well suited because one of the themes, or one of the like underlying reconciliations of this hub is how much of myself do I have to hide in order to belong? And my sense of responsibility for this has me in some ways kind of like crouching and being very traditional in ways that now like are starting to feel out of integrity. So it's interesting. It'll be interesting to go through this together, and I'd love to hear about your experiences with this, because like some of the thoughts that have been arising very recently and even in the last few days are the persona the persona that is like second nature, but is really adapted outside of me feeling like I'm in full integrity with really expressing myself, like is, in my like social media. And I'm starting to recognize how that's holding me back. Certainly holding me back from connecting with the right people. So it's one of those things that I'm going to have to figure that out. And it's really a matter of how quickly I can figure that out. That's going to be a determinant in terms of the time frame in me being able to grow this. Because as long as I continue to be attached and connected to a version of myself that feels safe, and it's so interesting how subtle this is, or even just how many layers this has in terms of like the kind of burning the boats thing, about walking away from like old, like sort of some of the conventional setups that I've had, really committing to that, to understand that like this new iteration of my life really requires that I let go of a lot of that. And it continues to reveal things, because I mean the thing is like spending 20 years investing in the creation of like a professional persona in a sense, and in that being somebody who plays it safe in a lot of ways. And I think if you know me one on one, I'm intense. And I think the thing is that honestly, that intensity belongs more in a forum where it isn't one on one. And that's a reconciliation I need to make. So that's my reflection as I enter into this fourth hub. So let's get into it. So this is the orientation. So if this is, page 156. So once again, the halfway point, which is kind of it's interesting, and I also find myself, I will say, I also find myself longing for the hubs that we're going to be reaching in this process, like longing for the exploration and the process that's within them. But we're here right now. But I just want to, it's like, it just, I mean, like as the kids used to say, it slaps, when they discussed when describing like a song or even no skips. No skips is better. No skips is better, actually. This book just, it's like I think one of the things is it really is consistent in its intensity. It doesn't let up. There isn't a section in here where it's like kind of like can doze through it, unless you're like super like unadapted in it, but it still is super emotionally evocative. So anyway, freestyle chat here. So for the orientation of this hub, and it's interesting too, one more thing I'll say is that for a book like this, that's a framework, the structure of it especially in the process of refining it and creating, because it is so massive that the structure and its consistency really matters. And just for like continuity. And that was one of the really, that was a really important thing to me, is the continuity would make it more manageable because it was already so expansive. I mean, we're talking about like defining like the human experience. I mean, does not lack ambition. But the thing is that it was interesting to through in the final refinements of this, like the last months of like proofreading, of rereading it, of really finding that like for here in the orientation and into the initial development, like some chapters would have these like longer orientations. Some of them, because you have the things, this is way too inside baseball here, but so the chapter opens up and you have like just sort of a preamble, and then you have the orientation, and then there's this kind of like piece, because the last reading was kind of like, here's the sort of overarching thoughts, and then you have the orientation, and then there's like this other free floating piece of kind of like big picture. So that was really, there was a point where that was really inconsistent through in the chapters. Yeah, it's interesting. And now, I mean, I think now it's like we kind of evened it out, but yeah, it's a process. Like I like one thing, people have been talking to me a lot more recently about writing their own books, and I think, I remember my editor, who's like a legitimate professional editor from like Condé Nast, and does Princeton academic work. So has like a very wide ranging level of ability and like professional background. And I remember she used to always be like, "Oh, you're really not going to like what I have here for notes," because they'd be really big. Like for part one used to be, I think it was like 7 chapters. Now it's 3. And they were organized incredibly differently. And she was like, I think this needs to be, something else. And what I'm getting at here was that I was always like, all right. Because there's a changeover where the process is about your enjoyment and your exploration in the content. So if it's fiction, it's like the characters and finding them and learning them and knowing them. And here it was like the exploration of this content and spending time in it and having my own process play out, and which was incredibly difficult. I mean, it just, and then in like writing about it while it's happening, and then the different iterations, and it's kind of like, it's almost interesting to be at the halfway point here, because it's a good like sort of analogy where it's like there's a place where you cross the threshold a few times in the process, admittedly. But so maybe it's not just so binary. It's like as you slowly walk through different thresholds where the work is now more and more becoming an offering that is about a communication that isn't about you. And I think some people never let go of the idea that what a person is receiving is something that's about the creator, where it's like it's really something about the receiver, and their recognition of you has to do with the connection of the things that are woken in them, that they sense perhaps you also have some like, yeah. But that was the thing where it was at the point where this thing about like really doing so much work in the book that would just rip huge parts out that I was, I'd spent a tremendous amount of work on. And that it just never, it wasn't like killing my darlings kind of stuff. It was like, no, this is an act of love, is an act of love and devotion to you. And that was the service, that it was like to like have the honor of being able to be in the process of the work, and to be in the process of it refining itself and finding its way to be better articulated so that it might reach people more effectively, that things disappearing. I mean, there's a file I have, there's a file I have. It's about, I think it's like between, I forget. It's like, it's a lot. I don't want to give page numbers. It's literally, I think, like the same amount of content that's actually in the book is in the file. And those are all the cutting room floor things that got taken out. Fortunately, I didn't organize them very well. I would just cut and paste them out into the file because it was a lot. It was kind of like, in the movie where like, there's all these things coming at you and you're like, all right, this one, that one, this one. And it would be like, I wouldn't want to be spending a lot of time thinking about like, where does this old piece belong? Because I was so in the process of figuring out where the new part was going. So there's a big kind of like slop, like, bowl of so it's like, I remember my editor was like, you could turn that into a book. I was like, I don't know if I ever want to like look back into that. I'm sure I will at some point, but anyway. So this is more like a discussion about halfway point and the considerations associated with that. And my wet hair. It's probably, I take so long, it probably is like dried to and gray, dried and gray by the time I'm done. So okay. Yeah. It's like I don't know. Okay. So we're talking about the fourth hub here. Yeah. And, I mean, of course, there's like more than a passing connection to the chakras and all of this, of course, because that is where, that's where the framework initially was like, oh, that lines up. And then the Anodea Judith's book came along. But I think that the thing with not calling them chakras is there's a lot of reasons I won't really get into right now, but also from my life and my experience in like the Western yoga schools and teachers and how chakras were taught. It's like a very broad stroke. And like a lot of like Western like co-opting of spirituality, it takes the parts it wants and it leaves the parts it doesn't want behind. And the parts it doesn't want are, I mean, like a lot like this practice. Like it's a good analogy because it's like the stuff that we want to explore is typically where we're most comfortable. And even where we're most comfortable thinking there's something wrong with us that needs to be fixed, where, like an example being, whatever the thing is, it's like, if you're like, all I want to do is figure out my career, like probably the emptiness that you're trying to solve for is like not related to doing things. It's related to feeling and respecting that and honoring that and letting more joy into your life. I think life just fill itself up passively by the actual like the sensate experience of it that's just like happening in the moment right now. If our life is, it's like, how do I make marriage work? And that's the fixation. It's like, if I can just make the marriage work. But in that, it's, like there, maybe that's a third hub thing, which is that it's like, well, probably the place that someone who is very fixated on relationships is not going to be looking is about the individuality of identity and being able to really form a solid sense of self that now goes into a relationship and can participate without creating codependencies and needing things from the relationship that are going to create imbalanced dynamics. And one of the things we look at here is balance. So that's one of the things about leaving the stuff behind that you don't want to look at, that like with chakras, where it's like, it's just about love, but it's also about systemic oppression. It's about humanization. It's about love, not as like romance and warm and fuzzy. And like, it's also about like breaking through into the places where we can look at a human being and somehow rationalize that they are somehow not worthy of redemption, not worthy of love, that we can wish that for somebody. We can want that somebody would never have love. Like somebody, it's like if people who have differing positions on things, they're dehumanizing you to dehumanize them to return the serve. So it's nuanced. So there's also aspects of safety as far as exposing ourselves to people who are dehumanizing us, but our practice in this. So anyway, so more to come on this topic. But yeah. There's something. So yeah, I mean, there really were, in working on this, there really were things that arose in the deeper explorations in this like extraordinarily liminal space. They spent years in. What I found was, it was like a lot of this stuff. It really, I mean, oh my God, hold on. Yeah. It's, I mean, like the thing is it's like, wasn't like a, Pinterest for a dream wedding. I mean, it just, it like the thing is like what's blocking the depth of our ability to love is about how much we can love ourselves. And as human beings, we are on a shared sort of humanity. So if we wind up creating a spectrum where there's garbage people and good people, we're constantly like subconsciously fearful about like, which one am I? And the answer is like, neither. Both. Yeah. All right. So orientation. Are you ready? Welcome to the fourth hub. So the physical location of the fourth hub is the chest, the upper back, shoulders, and arms. And not mentioned in here, there's also an aspect of the hands. Hands have both creation and connection in them. So there's actually like, I didn't put it in the drawings and incorporate it here. But it is in the holding. It's also in the creating. So math hands. So first cycle is between 4 and 7 years of age. And as somebody who doesn't have kids, one of the things about this is that it's like, as soon as somebody tells me how old their kids are, I immediately can now like tune into this aspect of kind of like what's happening with them. And it's kind of exciting. Task, humanization, altruism, and empathetic connection with both self and others. The right to give love, the right to receive love, and to belong. The identity is I am my relationships. And the reconciliation is how much of myself must I hide to belong. And so to the point of identity is that, and we get into this in the 10th, chapter 10 in the seventh hub, is our identity is multifaceted. So when we're looking at our identities with each hub, this goes back to choosing the ones that we feel the most familiar with. We'll tend to choose the ones that we most closely identify with. So by doing that, we focus where we're already probably a bit, I'll use stuck because no other words coming up. So I am my relationships. We are. It's part of our identity is our connections, community, communities like our faith, our family, even our geographic location, the group, whatever other groups we want, where we work, people we are connected with. So and one of the things too is like when you look through the identities is to see the ones that you don't identify with at all. So if you're like, I'm not like, that's a good sign that that's one of the areas to like explore further, to create the expansion that solves for the sense of like, there's something missing. I mean, the thing is like that there's something missing that's like so beyond comprehension, is like part of what the issue, part of it is, it's like there's something missing. And it's got to be something that's like beyond, sort of beyond. It's like, no, it's like there's just kind of facets of our human experience that when we really enrich them, kind of the sense of, what's this thing, it fills in. So, okay, I'm going to read this. I'm going to try to read through it relatively quickly. We'll see if that's even possible. Have you seen me do that yet? Have you seen me capable of that? I haven't. Yeah, please, I need receipts if you have. I don't believe you. All right. So intimate relationships offer profound opportunities for our transformation. But transformational dynamics can also arise with bosses, friends, neighbors, and even in nature. We're in relationships with everything around us, and our need to connect and belong is a shared need and tendency we see in other beings. No one can exist in isolation. And even if we can live in relative seclusion, we need farmers, plumbers, medical care providers, and myriad other people to make our lives possible. Boop. To be alive is to be in relationship. In adulthood, it's through connection to ourselves, others, and nature that we get the chance to repair and restore the first three hubs: trust, emotional literacy, and self-awareness. Well, this feels really nice reading this. It's like, I really feel like the air in this. It's like, whew. Through the multitude of ways our lives intersect with other people's, connections and relationships act like mirrors, reflecting and exposing hidden aspects of ourselves if we're willing to see them. So in chapters 4, 5, and 6, so that's the first, second, and third hub, I discuss the importance of early caregivers' consistency and predictability. Here, the dynamic balance of give and take, which originates in the second hub with attunement, evolves with the creation of social identity through our interconnection with others and our relationship with ourselves. We learn what matters most, both for ourselves and for others, by what we show up for. See chapter 6. That's the third hub. It's like that should have been a period. So we learn what matters most, both for ourselves and for others, by what we show up for. That's the third hub. So even taking pills to manage health conditions or to relieve pain can be hard to do when we struggle to connect with our inherent worth. The Mayo Clinic reports that 50% of patients with chronic illness do not take medication as prescribed. The World Health Organization reports that as much as 40% of patients do not adhere to its treatment regimes. And another study showed that in the United States, 12% of people do not take their medication at all. Many of us know from personal experience that it can take a caring person to remind us to take medicine. It's not necessarily a matter of whether a treatment or solution is easy. It's a matter of showing up every day, and showing up can be hard to do. So the reason I'd put that in there is that there's a tendency, so like everyone wants the easy way, the pill, the easy way. And, it doesn't matter. The easy way doesn't matter if at one's core there is not a sense of commitment in terms of showing up for oneself every day. Yeah. I mean, the thing is 50% of patients with chronic illnesses do not take medications as prescribed. And this came up actually, this was like sort of resurfaced, which was the like shocking, or shocking air quotes, or just the surprising maybe like fact, I guess you'd call it, that folks whose medication is life saving, is keeping them alive, do not take their medication consistently, that this is a phenomenon. And so the tendency to blame laziness or to shame someone or to go into that place instead of looking at that and thinking really more about a person's ability to love themselves by showing up every day, and even the tiniest of ways that have big radiating impact. So yeah. So new relationships bring the hope of positive change and the potential for transformation. A baby, a new friendship, a new job, or a new romantic partnership, or perhaps writing a book. Hee hee. All bring a sense that the future can be both different and better than the past. In the beginning, it almost always is. In the very early days of new love, holding patterns dissolve from the glowing gaze of a new partner. It's the idyllic period when new connections don't require work and feel incredible. Some meditation traditions call this the beginner's taste, a short, easy, early, effortless period when we temporarily experience the long-term benefits of a new relationship or practice without having to do the work. But the work does eventually come. Yeah. Like Mr. Miyagi said, beginner's luck. Beginner's luck. Beginner's taste. Yeah. Eventually, we come back to the mundane reality of adaptations and holding patterns, except that now we want that feeling back, and we may be willing to work for it. In these moments, the glow dims a bit, and when we hit these first few bumps in the road, we find ourselves back in the familiarity of ourselves. This is when we can either turn away or continue to show up and bravely begin restoring or strengthening the dynamic, homeostatic balance in ourselves and with others through the transformative crucible of love. Indeed. Whew. Here. Well, I'll tell you what, people have told me that this was a really difficult chapter for them. And I thought, really? Now I'm reading it and I'm like, oh, I get it. I get it. I get it. Okay. I get it. Sorry. Any person that I was like, thought it was the third hub was when it stopped being so hard. So hard. This is so hard. Oh my God. Yeah, I mean, this is it. I mean, this is it. This is it. This is it. Mm. Oh, it is, the whole thing, and I think that this is one of the most relatable things that happens for people, so human, is to have the attainment of something or hit a state of being somewhere, like in a perfect group of people, have achieved something physical, financial, purpose-wise, like to have achieved something, love, to have an intimate relationship. And that there's this point here where it's like you've transcended the mundaneness, like you're out of the everyday feeling, and there's a sense like, oh, finally that's over. Finally that's over. And so a lot of that, as someone who has traveled the superhighway of every known like, or as far as I know, every like conceivable way of trying to explore this, and keeping on finding myself back at the state of like, yep, here I am again. It's just this sense, it's this kind of like feeling. It's like, yep, here this is again. It's just like I'm always returning back to this feeling. Like this kind of like, this is how it feels to be me. So this is why what we're doing in Parinama is so profound. It's a shifting. It's a shifting, and it causes shifting. And and the difficulty, and I'll say this in closing here, my little mini mallet. And the difficulty of this is that we inadvertently become incredibly attached to the striving, the worrying, the like preempting bad things, fixating, resenting, you name it, it's in there. And it seems like one of those things where it's like, I just, when can this end? But when it ends, there's just a lot of space. Yeah. It's like, what do you want to fill that space with? What are the feelings? What's the experience? Just preparing for that in a way. I wish I'd been prepared for it. Yeah. I wish I'd been warned about, because it's peaceful and it's completely out of alignment with the world around you. So there's like a lot of coming in and out, which is like really can feel enormously disruptive and kind of sad in a weird way. Yeah. But anyway, more on that some other time. I've made 40 minutes, gone 40 minutes here. So anyway, I would love to hear about your thoughts on love, connection, belonging, the identity, the costs, the price we pay to our identity in order to have a social identity. It's a lot to consider. Whatever is your thing. I mean, there's just something that arises that's like kind of like first in line that stands out. And it's like, go to that. And that's enough. It doesn't, the overwhelm of like, there's so many things to consider. It's just the first thing. Look to that and explore it. It's one of the things too is some of this stuff where it can be like, oh, I see this. And it's like, just go to the thing. Just lean to the thing that kind of has the most kind of like grab and resonance. And sometimes it'll be kind of like that, and it sort of releases the other stuff. It's all kind of connected. So don't be like, oh, I have this now I have this long to-do list of considerations and things to look at. It all, I don't know. It's one of the things with this is that it's a different model as far as it being, potentially using a modality of like a to-do list and achievement and completing. And, it's like, like I need to finish this book. I need to finish this process. And it's actually just entering into something that doesn't have to be any of that, doesn't have to be anything. You get out of it what you get out of it. It could be a practice you practice for the rest of your life. It could be something you practice for the next hour. And for some folks, they get a breakthrough. And this, I've been doing this long enough to see what happens long term, but it's it's just enough. It's enough for them where they're like, I'm confident at work now. That, and just to be able to bask in that and to experience that, to think, gosh, this is great. Now I speak up for myself. Now I know how, now in my relationship, I'm not projecting on the person. I'm doing my own exploration with compassion, without shame. That's enough. It's enough if that's it. Just it's like really listening to your own self in terms of the process of what is going to loosen the tangle just enough that a little bit more life gets in, a little more air gets in, a little more joy gets in, a little more feeling alive gets in, a little bit more compassion, a little bit more consciousness, a little bit more like a lot like reduction of like reflexiveness, just like knee-jerk responses, a little bit less of that, a little bit less of that. I mean, the thing is like all we want to do is just feel more alive when we're alive, be able to have our life. And if it can be uncomplicated, like, look, and that the process is going to have an ebb and a flow. And the fact that there's going to be like strong periods with it, and then there's going to be periods where it recedes. But the thing is if this is, how powerful and potent this practice is that it'll call you back when it's time, when you need it. And it's to trust in that process in yourself. Not need this to be linear, not need to be like on this all the time. What showing up for yourself every day means is like, yeah, you have tools. Yeah, you have tools. Sure. A lot of people are using their tools just like every day to manage, like what you need is what you need, and trusting that and letting that process unfold for you. Takes time, but it's okay. All right, that's it for today. Look, my hair's not dry. I should probably. It's 45 minutes is a long time. So yeah, well, sending you a lot of love, 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 and connection. You belong. You belong. You belong. Yeah. Yeah, you are so worthy of love and redemption. We've all done terrible things and we can be redeemed. We can be redeemed. All right. Love you. See you next time. Bye for now.